Great. I can see that some participants are already joining. If you don't mind, we can wait 3 minutes and then we formally start. Great. Welcome, dear participants. Thank you so much for your time. We're waiting just 2 minutes for more participants to join. Okay, let's start. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm Ana Lucia Jacob, a Senior Project Leader on Human Rights and Good Governance Initiatives at UNITAR's Division for People and Social Inclusion. I remain at your disposal in case you want to explore possible synergies. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to this first online workshop in the framework of the Digital Government Capacity Building Program as a joint initiative of UNCTAD and UNITAR. I encourage you, dear participants, to send your questions or comments to the speaker, to the trainer, by using the Q&A Zoom tab, or raise your hand if you want to take the floor by clicking on the little icon at the bottom of your screens. Those participants who join us at least 75% of the time, to be measured by the Zoom system, will be receiving certificates of participation. So there you go, an extra motivation besides learning about this quite important topic. So to start, please help me with the PowerPoint. What are our learning objectives for today's event? Understand key concepts and principles of digital government, identify essential components of effective digital government services, learn methods for creating functional, agile digital prototypes, identify ways to maintain control of service design and implementation, okay, insights into user-centric approaches that bring government closer to citizens and businesses. Regarding our key topics, we will focus on, next slide, please. Great. What makes procedures complicated? How to simplify procedures, basic components of a digital government service, and introduction to prototyping. Without further ado, let me introduce our dear colleague, Mr. Kjartan Sorensen, coordinator of UNCTAD UNITAR Digital Government Capacity Development Program as our trainer for today's journey. He is a business and trade facilitation specialist, currently coordinating the UNCTAD UNITAR program. Over the past 17 years, Kjartan has worked on investment and trade climate reform projects, mostly across North and Sub-Saharan Africa, preliminary with UNCTAD and ITC. His focus has been on simplifying and digitalizing investment and trade-related procedures through initiatives such as the UNCTAD e-regulations and e-registrations systems. Now based in Geneva, Kjartan has during his professional career lived in Morocco, Burkina Faso, Tanzania, UK, and the USA. Kjartan holds a BA in Economics and Political Science from McGill University in Canada and a master's degree in International Development and Business from Roskilde University in Denmark. Now, please, dear Kjartan, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ana Lucia, and hello to all participants. I've seen in the list of participants that we have a very broad participation from all over the world. So this is very exciting. And many of you also work in government, so we are among friends here. Let me allow to share my screen. Okay, so as Ana Lucia mentioned, we are working with the Digital Government Capacity Development Program, and we have created this Digital Government Academy. So I'll be presenting that during my presentation, but without further ado, let's start looking at what is service design, the topic of today's webinar. So as you all know, there is increasing pressure to make services more efficient and more user-friendly across the world. Especially right now, there's a lot of talk about efficiency, cost cutting, etc. So perhaps now more than ever, this topic is on point. We think that digital government is perhaps the most concrete way to achieve these efficiencies and user-friendliness processes. But unfortunately, as you perhaps all have experienced in your daily lives, digital government is not always efficient, and it's far from always user-friendly. Indeed, there are very good online services, but there are many, many bad ones when they even work, right? And perhaps all of you can think of some recent experiences you yourselves had where you were like, oh, this is a really good system, and some where you were less happy. And please feel free to share your experiences in a few minutes. But this is why service design is so essential. It is the way to design these systems so that they actually fulfill the promises of digital government. But what do we mean by service design? Well, we can say that it's the creation of online services through which citizens and businesses can comply with the rules and in some cases receive benefits, right? More concretely, we can say that it is a succession of screens, like the screen you're looking at right now, that allows an applicant to fill out a form, upload documents if needed, pay a fee if there's a fee to pay, and submit their request. One or more operators to review the file and approve or reject the application, and a screen to send the applicant data to an online registry. And finally, a registration certificate can be issued to the applicant. So that's sort of a summary of what a service is. It's nothing more than that. That's what we mean by service design. So of course, it's not just about putting a form online, but it's building the whole digital journey from the user's first click to the final decision of the authority and the delivery of a document or a registration number. More and more, why even issue a document, we'll see. What is important is the number that is in the registry, that is the proof of your registration or your access to a certain benefit. So why are we talking about this? Because at the UN Trade and Development, we have a long experience in simplifying and digitizing government services. And today I'll be walking you through some of these experiences and some of these methodologies. And together with with UNITAR, which is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, we've joined forces to create this Digital Government Academy. So we currently offer webinars such as this one, and we base our work on offering tailor-made assistance to governments who wish to simplify and digitize their services. So very soon, you'll also see on our website that I'll share at the end of this presentation, some online courses and a full curriculum on digital government. So how do we digitize government services? Well, we always follow the same sequence. And very importantly, we're guided by a simple but important principle. There are 4 phases, and they're always in the following order. First, we clarify the existing manual procedure. I always say you cannot simplify or digitize what you don't know, and we'll be looking into this shortly. Once we have that information, we can try to simplify as much as possible. And I also rapidly dig into that in a few minutes. What does it mean to simplify, and how can we simplify? Then we design the digital version of the procedure. We'll also see, of course, what do we mean by a procedure? And fourth, of course, we implement the digital procedure. And we apply one guiding principle. We look at things from the user's point of view. Right? When we look at the moon, this is our point of view. But if we stand on the moon, of course, the view looks entirely different. And I think in government, we have a tendency to look at things from our perspective, but we forget to look at the perspective of the end user, right? Which tends to be very different. So we always look at procedures, we simplify them, and we digitize them from the user perspective, but with one goal in mind: to implement services that are truly user-centric. So actually, this simplifies our thinking already if we always stick to, but what is the best thing for the user, right? And there is this cartoon that shows how things can look extremely complicated, but if we keep the end user in mind, the customer, then things perhaps seem a bit more clear and a bit more tangible and attackable. So first phase, we start by clarifying the existing procedure. And for that, we use a tool called e-regulations. So allow me, while I switch, I'll demonstrate that one. So I'm going to take, we've implemented this system called e-regulations that we also use as a basis to support governments in implementing their trade portal, which is in essence a database of procedures that are described from the point of view of the user, right? So here, this is the Kenya e-procedures portal that I'm taking as an example because it's one of the systems that I've helped Kenya implement. So for instance, if I do a search on a county license here, let's say in the Nyeri County, I'm taken to this screen. And let's say I'm interested in viewing the single business permit. It looks like this. And you see that there are, to the left, 5 steps, right? I have to, and I'll zoom in a little bit to make it bigger for you. 1, you obtain a payment bill, you pay for an application form, you apply for a single business permit, you pay for it, and then you obtain the business permit. So you see on this step, every single step provides answers to 7 questions. 1 is, where do you have to go? So this is kind of the entity in charge. In this case, the County Revenue Department of Nyeri with the address. And then where do you have to go within that institution? is the unit in charge, right? It's the billing counter with the opening hours that looks like this. And then you have to see the senior clerical officer, in this case, is Miss Mutoni Matu, who's been kind enough to show herself as an example at this particular step. And then you're like, why do I have to obtain a payment bill? What is the expected result? Well, it's the payment bill, and it looks like this. And there is a time frame and legal justification. And in this case here, there are no requirements. You just have to show up and they give you the payment bill. But let's say once I've paid on step 2 and I apply, I go back to the same person. And in this case, there are requirements. I have to apply for the single business permit using this form, to have access to the form with all the fields. This is going to be very important for a service design later. The fields are the reflection of the information need of this institution, right? The county revenue, right? And supporting documents is the certificate of incorporation if you're a local company applying, a certificate of compliance if you're a foreign company, or a business registration certificate if you're a sole proprietor. And then the PIN certificate number, this is the tax identification number in Kenya, and then some added information on the business address. How long time it takes to complete the step, and especially what is the legal justification? Why do I have to obtain this business permit to do business in this county? And why do I have to provide these requirements? So I have access to the law here that can provide you with the legal justifications behind this, this step. And then lastly, if I have problems, who can I complain to? This is kind of the concept of good governance applied in practice. Well, I can complain to the Director Revenue Office, to Mr. Rafael Kanene Dumia, right? Whose photo we have here and contact details we have at the same county revenue department. So to summarize, we have these 7 elements, 7 answers to these questions is, where do I have to go? What will I get? What do I have to provide in order to get this result? Right? How long will it take, the time frame? What is the legal justification? And who can I complain to in case of a problem? And if there is a fee, how much is it, right? So this is the standard way we, at the UN Trade and Development, we describe procedures. And this is the basis on which we built our service design. With this information, we can create, we have all the elements needed to digitize this process from the point of view of the user. So I'll show you another example. For instance, here in Iraq, in Baghdad, a little bit more complicated procedure, one that involves 14 steps. So I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see and read. First, you need to obtain a trade name. Then you need to obtain the trade name approval, which is 4 steps. Verify the approval letter, pay the fees, print and sign the trade name, obtain the final trade name approval letter, deposit the capital amount, get deposit confirmation letter. Then you need registration approval. You apply for a registration online. So one step here is online, but then physically you have to receive an initial approval, get a badge card, check trade name, etc. And at the end, at step 14, you get a registration license, right? So we're starting to see a pattern here between these different blocks and institutions that are involved in this procedure, right? We have the Baghdad Chamber of Commerce, we have the Federation of Iraqi Chambers of Commerce, we have the bank, we have the Ministry of Trade company website, and we have the Ministry of Trade Registration of Company Directorate. But each of them have sort of the same structure. If we look at the point of view of the user, it's more or less often the same, right? You have to apply, you have to pay some fees, and you have to obtain the document. And sometimes, just as in this example that I showed you just before, sorry, you have to pay for an application form, right? And then you have to pay for a single business permit. Already here, by looking at this information, I'm getting some ideas as to how this process could be simplified, right? Are there any questions so far? Ana Lucia, do we have any questions so far, or is everything clear?
There's just one comment regarding the video recording of the presentation. And yes, we will be sharing this link so you can take a look again of the video, and also you can share it with your contacts. Then I don't see any question, any raised hand? No?
That's okay.
I have a question if possible.
Okay.
Sorry, I always come with questions. So, what are the IT skills you need to do service design?
That's a good question. Actually, perhaps a lot of you are asking yourself this question is, well, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a software developer, etc. Well, in fact, that might actually be an advantage. We will see later when we look into tools that allow us to do service design, that we don't need any specific software or IT skills. We need good information on the procedures, and we need that ability to analyze procedures, to put ourselves in the shoes of the user, and have that willingness to create good services. And more, as you know, AI is helping us even do away with software development. But there are a range of tools like the one I will introduce to you in a bit called e-registration, which is an entirely no-code development platform. So no code, of course, means you don't need the ability to code. Thanks for your question, Ana Lucia. The question about is it recorded tells me that also at the end, as I said, we'll be sharing a lot of the links and the training materials so you can have a look at it also. All right, so we looked at this e-regulation system, but we can also see that, unfortunately, here I'm looking at just one procedure, how to obtain a single business permit, right? But if, let's say, I put myself in the shoes of somebody else, somebody who wishes to enter foreign markets, like maybe a small farmer who wishes to sell products abroad, then it's not just a business permit you need, but a range of other documents and authorizations and permits and licenses that you require before you can actually get your goods out of the country. And to illustrate that, I want to show you something, which is the Kenya Trade Portal, just to remain in the same geographical zone. So let's say I want to export avocados, which is a standard in Kenya, a very important export product. It will take me to this page here. I'll zoom a little bit, which will tell me the different categories of procedures I have to go through. So there are preliminary registrations, licenses, and certificates. And here we already see that, wow, I have to register with the Fresh Produce Exporter Association. I have to register on the AFA Integrated Management Information System. I have to register with the AFA Horticultural Crops Directorate. I have to register on the KEFIS Integrated Export-Import Certification System. I have to register on the Trade Facilitation Platform with the KRA Rules of Origin section, with the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, and I have to obtain a food hygiene license. I'm already getting a little bit tired. And this is not to shame Kenya whatsoever, because I can tell you, this is the same situation in most countries around the world. That there are so many different authorizations you need before you can actually, in this case, do business and export avocados. And here I'm not even getting to the point of having my avocados and being able to send them out of the country. Then there is a range of permits. I need my avocados to be tested. I need a certificate of origin. I need a phytosanitary certificate and an export certificate. Only then can I go to the border and clear my goods at one of the many entry and exit points. And here I'll take the example, for instance, of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and you will see that it opens up the same structure, the same information. You have a list of steps to the left, and you have the information for each single step to the right. You have to go through clearing agents, there are some costs, there is requirements, there's a time frame, there's legal justification, and who you complain to in case of a problem. And if you compile all these different steps here to kind of get a feel, okay, I want to simplify the life of avocado exporters, let me first understand the full journey. Then it looks like this. Export avocados to the port of Mombasa, for instance, and we have a total of 40 steps. You need the membership certificate, make it a bit bigger for you. 3 steps, you need to register on the IMS portal. 1 step, you need the export license. Another 6 steps, you need to register on that CAFES portal. Another 4 steps. You see a lot of the steps are actually online, and some of them are physical. You need a registration letter, you need the food quality inspection report, 2-step pre-clearance to get the pre-clearance documentation, the certificate of origin, a total of 40 steps. What is interesting is that when I started working in Kenya on this system, it was actually more than 100 steps to export avocados. So in a relatively short time frame, they've actually used that information to reduce the number of steps and the number of requirements. So more than 100 to 40, that's a 60% reduction. And that brings me to kind of a second part here in my presentation, which is talking a little bit about how do we simplify procedures. And I will take a little short break here again to ask everyone if there are any questions, any inputs. If you want to tell us about an experience you've had with government services, please feel free. Ana Lucia, do we have any raised hands?
We have received one interesting question.
Okay.
One participant is kindly asking us to discuss about security of site.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question that comes back often when we talk about IT systems. And I want to reassure everyone that usually when you when you're at this the level of service design, you're not thinking too much about all these questions of IT security, right? Right now, you're thinking about how do I design a good service for the end user. Once you have kind of designed your system, then of course there are protocols and systems, etc., that are standard that are put in place to secure that these systems are not attackable, that the information is confidential, and there are so many different things that evolve all the time. So of course, this is a factor to be taken into account, but it's quite standard, and there are hundreds of thousands of systems that are secure. So of course, this is not the topic really of today's, but it's good to bring it up because it's not something that really should interfere with your service design implementation. Thank you. All right, so moving on to simplification, I'll go back to my PowerPoint if you allow me. So we looked at how we clarified the procedure, but once it's clearly understood, we can see that it becomes much easier to find ways to simplify it. And that's sort of our next phase, if you remember, our 4 phases, right? Before service design. And why are procedures complex? It's not necessary that they are so, right? But why are they complex? Because as you saw, they are typically many different institutions that are involved. And even within a public administration, there are often multiple officers that have a say in it. And of course, this can lead to various interpretations of the rules and the law, right? And typically, unfortunately, us government officers, civil servants, we have a tendency to want to control rather than facilitate. And we focus on the form. Is the form filled? Are all the documents there rather than the substance? How do I help this person complete their process? So what does simplifying mean here? It means making it easier for the user to comply with their legal obligations. So how do we simplify? Well, we simply reduce the number of steps. If you remember my example just before from Kenya, and we reduce the requirements, meaning the amount of information we as government request for the user, the amount of data in the form, the amount of documentary evidence, and that's about it, right? Reducing the number of steps and reducing the number of requirements. So now we look at service design. But before we do, I wanted to bring you to an interesting example that a colleague told me recently about their experience in Baghdad. Remember this procedure. The first one was obtain the trade name initial approval letter by the Baghdad Chamber of Commerce. But it wasn't one step when they started working over there. They showed me the initial procedure, and it was actually 16 steps to obtain the trade name first. At that same one. So what happened was they documented this process. And how they did it is that they put themselves in the shoes of the trader, and they went step by step and said, every time there's an interaction between me and the government official, then it's an interaction and I need to document the step. So they did that, obtain the request approval letter, and get orientation command to computer database. And every time they put a little sign and a stamp on the paper for the user to go to the next step to verify the trade name availability, etc. But when they did the presentation at the end to the president of the Baghdad Chamber of Commerce, he said, I believe, but I thought we had a single window. We had a one-stop shop, for people wishing to register a trade name. So he just went down there. He said, wait a minute, we'll just put everybody here behind a desk, so you only interact with one person. And these people will then do all the paperwork, the government officials, but for the user, it's one step. So they didn't digitize, they just reorganized themselves to offer a much improved service. So instead of the user going from one desk to the other, they're like, let's ourselves go from each other's desks and exchange information. So they didn't digitize and they simplified, right? So that's one way of doing it. Another way, of course, is doing service design. And let's have a look at that aspect now. So once the procedure has been clarified and simplified, and you know what data is really needed, what documents can be eliminated, and what controls are necessary, you can start designing an improved digital version, right? So interestingly, most digital government services, they follow kind of the same basic structures, right? So you have a user here to the left of your screen, and they want to register their information in a database because they want to obtain a certificate. For instance, they want to register the birth of their baby, for instance, right? So there is a process in place to get that new birth into a registry and in exchange get proof in terms of a birth certificate, right? So to do that, most digital government services follow the same basic structure. There is an applicant file, and then there is a processing in the back end, right, by government officials. So usually an applicant has to provide information, data in a form typically, and they have to provide additional documents, such as maybe a copy of their ID or the proof from the hospital that the baby was born. And then there very often is a fee to be paid, right? And perhaps initially there are some guiding questions in that system that kind of guide the user through the online system, such as what is your date of birth, are you married, etc., right? Which will adjust what type of information you are needing from the user. And then you send the file, and this information is reviewed by one or more officers. Just before I move on to that, you can see here that at that part, you can actually, in the form, you can implement exchanges with other registries. For instance, I talked about having national ID as one of the documents, but you could also have a system where you input, and more this is the case, you input the national ID number, and it will immediately check, let's say with the national ID database, whether that ID is true and corresponds to the name of the user. That way you don't have to upload that national ID, right? So already there you can have interaction with external databases, what we also call interoperability. So once the user sends the file, the information can be reviewed by one or more, typically more, public officials, right? And then there is a final approval and the information is sent. And there is an entry into a database where the data and the documents are stored and the certificate is sent back, right? So this is the registry. I just want to take 1 second to allow you to ask some questions, perhaps, because this is really central to service design. And Lucia, do we have anyone?
We don't have a specific question regarding this slide and the information
okay.
that you have just shared, but we have some comments, really nice comments indeed.
Okay.
So if you allow me, the first comment, I love the topic. Can we conduct training of trainers here so that we can echo this in our home countries? Well, for a TOT, it's feasible, but maybe not today. We can organize well in advance, and it's good to know that there is interest, so we can explore possible ways to move forward in this regard. Also, they are asking if we have a catalog of services you provide to countries. We will be sharing the link to the specific webpage we have. And UNTAC has been leading this initiative through the Business Facilitation Program for over 20 years. And they have a specific map where these where you can see the countries that have already been working with, and we will be sharing that link as well. Also, another comment, it says very impactful and grateful to be part of the program. Thank you as well. Thanks for your time. And sincere call for detailed discussion on the formulation and implementation of cybersecurity laws. That's all for now.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing. Thanks for your positive comments. Indeed, we can also connect after the call for who is interested in knowing more about the tools. But as I said, we'll also be sharing, of course, the tools. Right now, I'm showing the map of where we're currently, where we have or are currently working, where systems are implemented, what type of systems, etc. And we'll be sharing the link there. And of course, to the Digital Government Academy website as well, with different training and the projects that are done under the auspices of this academy. So moving on back to this one. So this is, I took the example of a simple registration, a birth, right? But what happens if you recall that example from Kenya where there were multiple different authorizations you needed to export your avocados, right? What happens? How do you design a digital service for that? So, by the way, this is what we call a service, right? Is designing this, right? If you remember from the beginning, it's the applicant file and the processing, the sending the data to a registry and the sending back the certificate. That's designing a service. And for that, we use, somebody asked a question about the tools we have. At ONCTAD, we have a tool, and we will show that in a little bit because we're going to design a service together, is we use a tool called e-registrations, which is this no-code development platform that allows somebody like myself, who is not trained on software development, to design online digital services, right? So what happens when you want to combine different services, right? You have administration one, they want data, they want documents, and they want money, right? They want to get paid for their fees in order to issue their certificate. And so is it the same for administration 2, administration 3, administration 4, and so forth, right? I often take the example because at UN Trade and Development, of course, we've worked a lot on the simplification of business registration, which involves registering at something called the trade registry, registering with tax authorities, registering employers and employees, etc. Right? So how do we combine these services? And this is often called by many like a single window. Perhaps you've heard this term before. But basically, it's about combining all the forms, the documents, the money into one part. So you only have to submit these once as a user, right? Just like the one-stop shop example I was telling you, the physical one-stop shop in Iraq. So you have the applicant file, you provide all the data you need, what we can also call a single form, but this one it would be a simple digital form, a single set of documents, and one payment, and the money will be channeled to all these administrations. And there might be a guide, as we said, with initial questions, and then you send the file. What happens then is a bit more complex than the previous example, because you might have admin 1 that first needs to revise the file before it can move on to the others, and then they approve. And once they approve, maybe they issue a certificate. But then perhaps the file is sent to administration 2, and they also need to review. And then they need to form a technical opinion. And then they need to also submit it for approval and send their certificate. And then you have admin 3, maybe it's just an approval, it's an easier process, you get your certificate. Admin 4, maybe there's an inspection, maybe there's an approval, and again, a certificate is issued. And then you have the other administrations that are involved. So this is also a service, except we call it a joint service, right? You have different institutions, but the user is only interacting with one screen and not X amount of administrations, right? So before we move on to actually design this together, the fourth phase, of course, is implementing. And I just wanted to say a few words about that before we move to service design. Implementation means once you have developed your system, you're moving to testing. Operators, managers, applicants, right? Operators need to test it thoroughly. The bosses need to test it, and the end users, of course, very importantly, need to test the system to be sure it's fit to their needs, right? And then, of course, there's a huge element of training, and this is something we do here at the Digital Government Academy, training on the system, on the process flow for operators, and also that the operators understand what is the purpose of the system. And then throughout, implement help and support mechanisms, and of course, allow for continuous feedback, adapt the system to all these feedbacks, make it evolve, because procedures change all the time, and you always find ways of making it better. So These are sort of the four elements of the implementation. But now let's move on to designing a service together. So before I do that and we turn to another system, the one I introduced that we call e-registration, no code, I wanted to hear again if there were any questions. I know it's quite dense, so please feel free. Or any comments again.
We have two comments. Nice comments indeed. This is very interesting. This is from one participant. Another one is related
Thank you.
to express gratitude to honorable guests, host, platform authority attendants, and related all. And I have a question, Kjartan.
Yes.
Do you find this as an opportunity for strategic partnerships? How could different partners be involved in the development of these online services? Could you explain a little bit more about how different stakeholders could join either as donors or as beneficiaries? How could it be?
Okay, thank you for your question. First of all, you remember that when we looked at how many different institutions involved and just what we showed just before, you have the administrations here. So when you are designing a service, of course, these different administrations have to be involved in the design. And that's why we often encourage to have these service design workshops, right? Where you have these different institutions that are involved. Remember, you've clarified the process, you know who's involved, so you know who to invite, right? So that's one thing. Service design is also very interesting because you can also use it as a tool to say, okay, this is the process as it is now, and this is the service we want to, this is a prototype, let's say, that we want to implement, but we need support. So using that prototype as sort of showing the ambition of the government to perhaps some financial partners could be very encouraging because they see the vision and they see how close it is to actually implementation. They see something tangible. So that's a very important way, I think, to use visual tools like this to show something tangible. We find that that's been very helpful because, you know, traditionally, when you do implement services, the traditional thing is describe the problem on a very long paper in a report, and then in an even longer report, you will describe the system you would want, right? But you don't really know what system you want. So you're writing a 40-page document with system description that you need, and then you take that one to different partners in the hopes that perhaps somebody would like to finance it. But it often takes several years, right, to get the support. And over time, the system, the procedures, etc., will have evolved. So this is why system design also is so important, is you're doing away with the need for these very long, complex system descriptions, and you have a prototype that can evolve and take the inputs from all the administrations into it. So once you have that prototype, you are so much closer to implementation. And this gives great reassurance to potential partners who want to support it, right? They say, oh, it's not just another IT implementation that will never yield any end results. I hope that answered your question, Ana Lucia.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Okay, so as I said, let's design a system together. So for that, we have developed a system called e-registrations, and what you're seeing on the screen here, and here, please, we'll go into some details. We'll go over it a few times, but please raise your hand if you want me to go back or something, right? Because it is a lot of material. So here I've created sort of a test simple service, which is register an individual business with the tax authority. So here I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who wants to register an individual business. I want to do business as myself, right? And as a result, I have to register that intent with the tax authority. So let me click here. I open the service. First, I see that I have, and I will zoom in a little bit more, I have some initial questions. For instance, do you have a criminal record? Or no, do you have a clean criminal record, right? If I say no, well, you need a clean record to proceed. You know, in most countries, they don't allow people with a criminal record to do business, right? So already there, you can move on, you can validate your guide. And then there's date of birth. So I'm not gonna tell you when I was born, because it's very, very long time ago, but let's say I was born 11 May 2000, I can proceed. But of course, if I said I was born in, let's say, 2012, I should be more than 18, I can't proceed, right? So you can implement small controls like this to guide the user in the right direction, right? And they're gonna ask me, what is the business activity? Are you in retail trade? Are you in food services? I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger for you. Construction and home repair, freelance creative media. Let's say I'm in food services, right? So I validate the guide and I'm taken to my form. So who am I? Well, I am, let's say, Thomas Orange, my brother. And let's say I'm from Denmark, Danish. I'm Danish, that's my nationality. And my email is right. And I live on Wayland Road, number 425, New Jersey, in the province of, well, let's say New Jersey, in Menton. And my phone number is like this, right? You're all familiar, nothing out of the ordinary, a very simple form. Then there are some documents that I need to upload. So for instance, my national ID, right? Upload my national ID, a utility bill, like maybe an electricity bill to show my proof of address. I'm going to upload that one, and the clean criminal record, right? Okay, that means I can proceed, and I have to pay $50 for taxpayer registration fee. So here I might have to upload my payment receipt, right? I confirm the payment, and then I'm asked, by sending this application, I certify that the information I've provided is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge. And then how do I obtain my registration certificate? A digital business tax registration certificate will be sent to your online account once we have processed and approved your application. Sounds very good, easy. So I validate and send. Okay, file submitted. Now I see here that my file is pending, right? So now I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the government official receiving this file, right? So I'm going into processing. And I see the file here, and it's at initial review stage, right? So I go in here, and it says, please carefully review the documents and the data to verify accuracy and eligibility, send back for corrections. Okay. If you find discrepancies and irregularities. Okay, so I'm looking at the documents. Okay, the national ID, I can download it if I want to, right? And I look at the data. Okay, this person wants to do business in food services. The date of birth is okay. The person is paid. This is name. Okay, sounds very good. Let me approve this and send it to approval. Okay, so now it's my boss maybe. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of the boss. At approval stage, same. I'm looking at the documents, looks good. I'm looking at the data. Okay, everything is fine. Okay, let's register this entrepreneur. Approve. Okay, so now let's see what happens. I will go back to my being the user dashboard, and I see here that it's still pending. Let's refresh. Oh, it's been approved. Great. And I have a result here, which is my tax identification number. Excellent. BizReg 7 is my tax number. I'm in food services. My registration is today. My first name, last name, I'm Danish. And I live here. Okay, simple certificate with a QR code to see if it's authentic, if it's really a registration that actually occurred. Okay, so now I want to see. Okay, but how come that I got this information? That means that that information has been stored somewhere, right? So let's go and see if this information is in the database. And this is a database of the institution. And let's see, I'm going to refresh or just check recent entries. And we see here, and I'm going to make it a bit bigger for you, that Thomas Sorensen was indeed registered in the database, right? And we see the different documents, the utility bill, the criminal record, and the ID, right? That we submitted. Okay, so this is a functioning digital service. There was a guide, right? Let's go back to it. There was a guide with initial question. There was a form, right? There were documents that I need to submit. There was a payment that I had to provide, and there was an element of sending that file to the government officials. And in the back end, you saw there was processing by the UN tax revenue fictive office, right? Are there any questions so far? I guess we're all good. So how did we create this system, right? What we see here is the screens, right, that the user sees. But how did I design the system? Well, we use something we called Business Process Analyzer Admin. This is our e-registrations no-code development platform. So if I click on that one, it takes me here. And now we will see how I designed this service. Register an individual business with the tax authority. So you see here the information, first name, last name, nationality, email. You see the business address. So you see this is the backend mirror. And if I say, well, actually, it makes more sense to have the street number before the street name. Well, I just drag and drop it and change the order, right? But I don't want to do that. So I turn it back. So you see here, there's a concept of this drag and dropping of these different fields, right? So far, so good. You remember the guide? There were these initial questions. Do you have a clean criminal record? And if I put no, well, I wasn't able to proceed. It showed the user this warning, you need a clean record to proceed, right? So there was a determinant on this one. The determinant is an effect on this field. I said to the system, if user answers no, show this sentence, you need a clean record. So how did I do that? Well, I created something in the system called a determinant. And this is probably the most important part of this system is that's really programming, right? That's what software engineers do all the time when they design system. They design rules, the rules of the system. If this is this, then this, right? So here I have this not clean record, which is a determinant. And I simply said, I called it not clean record. And I said, it applies to this field. Do you have a clean record? And if it's no, then show it, right? and then I create, so that determinant, I attach it to this one. So when the user says no, it shows this, right? You can put determinants on every single field. Now I want to show you what happens because the data in the form here, how did it get onto that certificate of the user? Here, remember my user here, he got his file approved and he got a text identification number, right? How did that information land here? Well, it went from the form into that registry, right? You remember from the slide, the the the, the database, and then it sent back the number, right? And the certificate. Well, how did we do that one? So hold on, because it gets quite exciting. You have the processing rules here. So once I submit, you have that initial review that we showed you before. Then you have the approval. But then there is something called the bot that sends the information to a database, this one, right? And then uploads the certificate to the user file. So if we click on this one, this is the mapping of my business's registration create bot. So I take information you see here on the left, information on the guide, date of birth is sent to my database at the entry date of birth. Business activity, the same, right? And in the form, the section, the first name, the nationality, the last name, the email, and the business address, and all the documents, right, that I submitted as well. These are now stored into this database, which you can transport onto your own server, for instance, right? From one server to another. Are there any questions so far, Ana Lucia, or anyone? Do we have any comments?
Yes, so there's one interesting comment. It says, I understand that talking about digital transformation initiatives or digitizing government services in webinars like this are very interesting. However, this might not be true in most cases, especially in countries with underdeveloped ICT infrastructure, low digital literacy, among other factors. Could you share your experiences implementing these kinds of e-government services in developing countries where IT infrastructure, digital literacy, government support are limited, and political and economic conditions are unfavorable? How effective were these online services compared to the manual traditional system?
Okay, several questions into one, but very good questions. Yeah, so what is interesting is that, so I've had the pleasure of working in many countries, many of which you would consider developing. And we see in all countries from Togo to Vietnam to Kazakhstan to the US to Denmark that there are digital systems everywhere. Everybody is implementing them, right? And it doesn't matter. In fact, some countries actually that in the developing world, let's say, are leaping faster than the typical developed countries, right? I'll take the example of Benin, for instance, which has a Benin digital agency that is really digitizing a lot of services. Thousands of services are being digitized, and hundreds have already been digitized. From that birth certificate to obtaining a digital a driver's license to registering a business, etc. So it's not. I haven't seen actually any country where there are no digital service yet at all. But there might be a few exceptions. Just to say that everybody's digitizing. And but then the very good question is, how do you ensure that these systems are adapted to sort of the skills and the access of different people, right? And the simpler the system, the easier it's going to be used. Um, and I'll give you an interesting example. I remember from Benin, where they used to have these antennas around the country to register a business, but actually you had to come to Cotonou, the capital, to register your business to finalize the process. So you had to travel for all the way north to the country down. So this was not very easy and very costly and time consuming, right? So when they digitized the process, they actually just eliminated all their offices across the country and instead just made it digital. So that means that anywhere from any cyber cafe, you could actually register a business, and you can actually do that now. And little by little, they just completely eliminated the need for the physical because people adapted very rapidly. And I think what happened was people actually needed help. They actually went to somebody who had an internet connection and got it done. What we saw was, I think, more than tripling in the number of business registrations in that country. So it was actually the other way around. It was not that people were left out, but they were much more included in the process and had an opportunity to register their business, whereas before there was just this huge barrier, which was you had to travel all the way to Cotonou to register your business, and you were like, what's the point? And they made it extremely simple. I think it takes under 3 hours to be registered simultaneously with the trade registry, the tax authority, and social security in Benin. And actually, they're using that system that I'm showing you right now to do so. So sure, you have to adapt to the context, but I think it's actually the other way around, is that actually digital allows you to provide better services than the traditional having to go there, waiting in line for hours, going from one office to another. In many, many countries now, we have access to internet has been really democratized quite a bit. Or you know somebody who knows somebody who has an internet connection that you can go through, or through and most people also now have mobile phones, right? So it's a relevant question, but it's becoming less and less a problem. What was I think, did I answer the questions correctly? Or enough? Lucia, I think there was a two-part question.
Yes, if you want me to read again.
Yes, please, because yeah.
Yes, with pleasure. Let me check. So I understand that talking about digital transformation initiatives or digitizing government services in webinars like these are very interesting. However, this might not be true in most cases, especially in countries with developed ICT or ITC maybe infrastructure, low digital literacy, among other factors. So here's the question. Could you share your experiences implementing this kind of e-government services in developing countries where IT infrastructure, digital literacy, government support are limited? Yes, you already shared. And then political and economic conditions are unfavorable. How effective were these online services compared to the manual traditional system? Maybe you can explain a little bit more on the last part.
On the effectiveness, indeed. Well, I think the example of Benin that I provide showed how effective it was, because it tripled the numbers keep increasing, tripled the number of people actually taking the time to register their business, joining the formal sector. So it can be highly effective when the systems are well designed. And this is why it's so important to design services that are adapted to the user. And in the countries that were mentioned, where the end user might not have advanced skill set, it's even more crucial to develop simple systems, right? It's remember this simple form that I showed. this is typically easier than the form you find if you go to the municipality, right? To register a birth, for instance, right? It's more user-friendly and it's easier to click. I always take the example of Facebook. No one was trained on Facebook, and yet everybody can use it, right? So I think that that divide is becoming less and less, but of course needs to be taken into consideration.
Yes, and regarding political and economic conditions that could be challenging, it's also important to highlight that you can find third parties maybe who could support to pave the way. So maybe it could be, let's say, in some cases, there are some projects with the support of the European Union, could be, or with the support of a specific country, or even the of from the private sector, if I'm not wrong, Kjartan.
Yeah,
So
no, I mean, absolutely. Yes, and Lucia, thanks for leading me that way. I mentioned that a bit before. If you have a good prototype and you know where you want to go, it's much easier to obtain support. And it's the same within government. If you can show the methodology, where you were, how complex it is, and what you plan to do, and how you want to get there through using a prototype like this, it's much easier to gather support from high-level officials, which is needed also to get funding. And I've had the chance to work on multiple projects around the world where um, we the governments were actually successful in obtaining funding. There is quite a bit of funding for creating more efficient government. You remember my first slide? I talked about there is big push for making government more efficient, saving money, uh, doing things easier. People are now getting used to, booking, purchasing things online, ordering online. They're like, why does it have to be so complicated? People don't have the same patience as used to, and governments feel that pressure. And partners, financial partners, they like digital systems because it also creates transparency, and there is a lot of information you can do with the data you see in this database. Once you have this information, you can add on many other services, and you can understand who your customers and who your constituents are, right? And you can do so many interesting things with this information, with the statistics and the data, to create better and more adapted services that are better attuned to government. So with the right argumentation, it is relatively straightforward to obtain backing for such projects. Thank you. Back to our service design example. So you remember where we left off was looking into how we managed to get the data into this database, right, and sending it back to the applicant. So I wanted to show you this mapping. So here on the left, I have the fields from my form and my guide, as you remember, right? Do you have a clean criminal record? What is your date of birth? What is your business activity? And then sending it here to the database, which is the exact same fields that you see here, right? On the DB structure. Right? So here I can add and remove fields. We'll see how we do that. So that means that when this bot here, the approval, it sends a signal to the system to register, to send the information to the database. And then there is another bot that generates the tax registration certificate to the user. So going back here again into my bots, you see the mapping here. I'm saying, okay, send the information to the basic database, and in exchange, receive information from the database into my certificate that you see here. Remember my certificate? So I'm telling the system, send back the tax identification number that you have now generated, send back the data to my certificate. And the certificate is maintained here, as you saw it, text registration certificate web. It has its logo, it has the QR code component. I can change its name if we want to call it something else, of course. And it has the taxpayer number, the business activity, the registration date, the first name, last name, nationality, date of birth, business address, province, street name, etc. And we can add fields, right? This is a very basic certificate, but it has probably the important elements, right? So let's look at it again. This is what it looks like. And of course, we can add layers of design, etc., and making it look much nicer than this, right? Okay, so basic system, but I think probably if you governments have a tendency to want to know a little bit more about you, right? When they register you in their database. So what are some other questions we would normally have in here that we can add to our service? I want to show you how we can modify the service, right? Let's say we're in a service design workshop and somebody raises their hand and says, yeah, that's very interesting, but we forgot to ask if the person is married because that has tax implications if there is a spouse, right? Okay, well, let's add that question in our application file. So why not ask a question here that we call, so I'm going to add this into my database. I'm going to add a new block that I call spouse or spouse information. Right, spouse. That's spouse. And we want the same information as this one. First name, last name, nationality, email. So I just first, I want to keep the same structure here. So I'm going to drag and drop columns, and I'm going to say I want 2 columns, each of 3, I think it is, width. No, it was actually 4. Okay, so see here and here. And I want also first name, last name, nationality, email of the spouse, right? So let me drag here a field that I called spouse first name, right? And then another one here, spouse, not soups, spouse last name, right? And we also want the email. I can also just copy this one and drag it under. Okay, email, and we also want nationality. I'm just going to copy this one and put it under here, right? Okay, so now we have, but what if the person doesn't have a spouse? It would be kind of silly to ask them to fill this information if they don't have a spouse, right? So we need to ask a question, do you have a spouse, right? And we could put that here, that question, or we could also put it in our guide, initial questions, right? So under business activity, we could have another question, or above, under date of birth, for instance, we could have something like a question. So here I'm going to implement something we call a radio button, and with 2 answers, yes, no, right? And we're going to call it, are you married? Right? Are you married? Yes or no? I'm going to make this button look a bit nicer, like this one other. So I'm going to say it's switch. Switch. This is not so important, but just sake. So it looks like the same one. Are you married? Yes, no. So now I need to tie that into my form, right? I want to say, if you say yes, I want to show in the form here this section, right? make that one mandatory, but I don't want to show it if it's not, excuse me. So I'm going to go in here and create a determinant. And I don't have this determinant here, so I'm going to call it married, right? For instance, I'm going to add a determinant married. And it's a determinant based on field. What is the field? Are you married? Predicate equals yes. Okay, excellent. Save. The determinant is created, is now in my list. I'm going to assign it to this, and I can recycle the same determinant throughout the system. Now it's here. Spouse is here. Let me publish the service so we can see if it works. Very important. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the applicant and see if it works. So give me 1 second. We're going to publish. Service published. Excellent. So that means that I can go here and I should be able to refresh. And let's see here. Do you have a clean criminal record? Yes. I'm born in 2000. Are you married? Yes. And I'm in construction and home repair this time. Validate guide. Now it's asking spouse first name, spouse last name. If I go back to the guide and I say no, you see that it disappears, right? So we're not going to burden. You remember those long forms sometimes that are like 7 pages long? It's because these forms I just filled to take every single type of applicant into consideration. And this is why very often, you know, when you have to fill a form, you have this I have this almost physical discomfort before I need to fill a form because it looks so complicated, right? And there, go to part C if you are this, and that way with these questions you can tailor-made the form to suit to fill the exact specifics of that user. We can continue. For instance, I know that very often, if you are in real estate and property management, often they want to see like a kind of maybe a qualification that you are a real estate agent before they allow you to do business in this. So you could say, well, if you're this, well, then upload your credentials, for instance, as a real estate agent, right? So these are just rules, aka determinants that we put into the system, right? So now let's. The problem is, of course, that now I added this. I'm going to say I'm married. Yes. I added this information, so it's here in my, but it's not in my database, right? So if I submit it, it's not going to be stored anywhere, and it's certainly not going to be on my certificate, right? So I need to add this information into my database. And doing so, I click here on this button called database structure, and I'm going to add a block here that I'm going to call spouse, right? I'm going to add a block that I call spouse. And I remember that we need the first name of the spouse. We're going to need the last name of the spouse. We're going to need the nationality. So that was a catalog. And we're going to need, was it the email, I believe, right? Okay, so now I have this. I have individual trader, I have spouse. So I need to save it. And I need to publish it so that my system is aware that there is a new database structure to take into consideration. So now we see here that it was updated, but of course, for the previous entries, this is not filled. We never provided that information. I'm going to take 1 second here and ask everyone if they have some questions or some ideas of things they want to do in the system, or are there any specifics in the systems you would like to zoom into?
There is one question.
Yeah.
It's related to artificial intelligence. One
Uh-huh.
participant, yes, is asking if AI already integrated is already integrated in the platform, and also if the system is for free.
Okay. Two very good questions. AI, is it already integrated into the system? I would say, funny you should ask, because probably because you're familiar with AI, you're like, wow, we could probably design. Why even do this drag and drop? And why can't we just tell the system what it should look like? And indeed, this is something I know my colleagues are working very hard on since the past year, is to integrate agents so I don't even have to drag and drop and just simply have maybe an agent, AI agent into the system where I can say, add a field, ask for spouse, add a rule that add a field that to ask if you're married, and if that is no, then do not show the spouse. So that basically a rule engine that will be entirely AI powered. We are working on that. We also on these systems here that you see that you remember here, we're implementing AI agents to use the information that is in there. This is a bit besides the point, but I'm going to show you a system here that if it's still work in progress. If I'm in here, you see there is a chatbot here, which is an AI agent. So it only will use the information that is on here. It's still in a testing phase, but it's using, the language model AIs that you're very familiar with, such as DeepSeek, ChatGPT, etc. So here I could say, what are the requirements to import a car into Tanzania? So it's gonna search. It's gonna provide information. As you see, it's relatively quick. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So it's taking the information from the database of procedures in here. And here they're taking you to the right procedure into the system. Use motor vehicle import clearance procedure, and they're providing you with all kinds of information. So that's one way we're also going to implement AI. But just to say, yes, definitely AI will transform the way and fast track, hopefully, the way we do service design and the way we provide good services to users. The second one was the question of cost of this system. So the system is not currently free, although that is the actual kind of objective, because we have a large team of engineers that are working on developing the system for many years, and it's still evolving. For instance, to incorporate new tools and AI. So there's quite a bit of work to make it as easy as possible, as stable as possible, et cetera, right? As user-friendly as possible, and keeping up with the latest technology. So at the moment, it's not free, but the beauty is that once there is sort of a system like this, you can generate all the services you would like in your country, right, or in your institution. But I think the goal eventually is to make it an open source system. Thanks for your question.
Great.
All right. Yeah.
just one thing. Thanks, Kirtan. We don't have more questions on the chat box, but we have 30 minutes left before we finish.
Thanks very much. I mean, I could go on the whole day on designing services, but of course, I'm just showing you the initial things just to have a feel for how we can design these digital services. So allow me just to finish my my example here, where I want to send the spouse information into my new database, right? So I'm going into my service, oops, here, and I want to send this information to the database. So I need to go into this role here that I can also see here, business registration create. I'm going into this mapping, but I don't see it here yet because I haven't updated the system with the individual trader. There is no mention of the spouse. So I'm going to have to refresh here to make sure that I select the latest version of the database. You see it's version 1.8. Not refresh here. And I'm going to update it to 1.9. Just going to do something here. Okay, so now it's 1.9. So I see the information on spouse, right? It's here, but it doesn't receive any information from the left, which is my form, which now has the spouse information. So now I can map spouse first name with my spouse first name. And I can take the last name to the last name. So here I'm saying take information on nationality and put it in the database under nationality, right? Take the email and put it there once this bot is activated, right? So now the information will go into my database here. It should. We're going to test it. But still, we're missing a part, which is it will not go to the certificate. We need to complete this into our certificate. So here you're on the certificate, but in my certificate, there is no room for spouse. So I have to add that in my certificate as well, right? So I'm going into my certificate and I'm going to make room for that information because I want actually that information. Maybe you don't need it to be on the certificate, but for the sake of this example, let's put it there. So same thing, I'm just going to add here spouse, right? And I'm going to say, I just need first name, last name, nothing more, right? Say okay, first name of the spouse. First name. Save. And then last name. Right, so now I can go back to my bot, as you remember, and I can redo the mapping. I'm loading the mapping. And now to the left, I should be able to see in my certificate the right place for putting the spouse information. Yes, great. So this means I can take from the right, which is a visual representation of my database, the information, first name. This is what we call mapping, last name, right? So now let me think. We have the information in the form, we have it in the guide, we have it in the form. We have adapted the database. We have told the bot to send the information on the spouse to the database, and we have told the system, the bot, to generate the certificate, including information from spouse. Okay, let's publish and see if that actually worked. or if I forgot something, which is not unheard of. Service published. Okay, so let's refresh over here. Start a new application. Want to register an individual business? Do you have a clean criminal record? Yes. Are you more than 18? Yes. Are you married? Yes. I'm in freelance creative and media services. It's asking me my spouse name, so we're going to be John Smith. We're going to be an Australian. John Smith at google.com, let's say. The spouse is going to be Bridget, first name that came up. The nationality, she's going to be from Bangladesh. And bsmith at gmail.com, right? And they live Flower Street, number 110, in Canberra province, in the municipality of, I don't know the geography of Australia. Sorry if there are any Australians in the call. And here is their phone number. I'm going to validate the form and I'm going to upload. We could have asked also for the ID of the spouse, right? But we forgot about that. Or I forgot about that. We have the criminal record. No, that's the utility bill. It's not good. The utility bill here and the clean criminal record. And we're going to go next. Upload the payment receipts. So here, of course, I'm just showing that perhaps you paid the fee at a bank and you're uploading the payment receipt. But in most countries now, where I've had the pleasure to work in, they often have credit card options or mobile payment options that can be plugged into the system here, right? These are often nationally available. In most countries I work with now, you can at least do mobile payments. So if there's a mobile payment service provider, it can be included here, so you don't have to go to the bank, for instance. Or you can, of course, do it through your online banking. Certify. Okay, so now we're going into part B again, processing. I have applicant, that's me, but the applicant is Smith, and I'm the initial reviewer at the UN Tax Revenue Authority, and I'm seeing all the documents, I'm seeing all the data, everything is fine. There is information on the spouse, perfect, right? So I'm going to go ahead and send it to approval. I could also have sent it back to correction saying, I'm seeing here in the national ID records that your wife is not Bridget, but another one, for instance, right? Then I'm going to the approval, let's say the manager of taxpayer registration. Same, they check the documents, the data, and they approve. Okay, so now you see here it's at that bot stage that I call register biz. This you can also hide for the applicant. So, but here I'm actually in the back office. So now I'm going to go into, I'm now John Smith, right? And I'm going to see that it's pending. Still pending. Takes a bit of time to send the information into the database. Maybe we made a mistake. I hope not. Let's see if the database shows that entry while we wait. John Smith is there. Great. The information, as you can see here, of the spouse, Bridget Smith, is here, right? And they live on Flower Street in Canberra. Their phone number and documents are there, right? And they have biz registration number 8 as their tax identification number. Let's move back here. It is now approved. Let's see if the certificate is fine. Business registration certificate, freelance creator and media services, John Smith, nationality, spouse, Bridget Smith, business address. Okay, great. We succeeded in changing the system, adding a little bit of complexity into it. And of course, now we can add many, many more. So this was my presentation of this online service system. We still have a few minutes. So if there are any questions or suggestions to change the system to add another question, please feel free, and we can go into these details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kjartan.
And Lucia?
We have one comment.
Mhm.
If it is not free, it would be difficult to tie this up with a government agency, as the agencies require complex bidding processes.
Complex.
Regarding the software.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely, that's a valid point. Unfortunately, digital government systems are rarely free, right? And there is often a competitive bidding process. What I can tell you, the good news is that I think in general, this tool is priced at a very competitive price because it's not a for-profit, so it's to cover the evolutions of the system and not the initial investment. So yeah, but there are no we have not seen on the market an equivalent of such a no-code development platform that allows to create services, be them simple services, like if you remember the PowerPoint, just registering with one institution, or complex, more complex services that involve combining several registrations. Remember this idea of joint service, or often called single window. But yes, of course, IT systems are often quite expensive, but I'm fairly certain that e-registration is very competitive. So in a bidding process, it could work that this was the selected one. I hope that helped.
Thank you.
Any questions about looking into the system or looking into one specific? What I didn't show you was, of course, the ability to send. I mean, there are many things I didn't have time to go into and kind of like parts of the system. For instance, all the emailing back and forth and alerts. You know, you can configure it so you can send back for corrections. You can put a determinant on a role. If the person is married, it should go to another department. And you can add here on the role different emails like initial review. You can say, okay, when you receive the file is pending, you can add a message saying, dear initial reviewer at UN Revenue Authority, a new file is waiting for your review, right? So that they make sure they actually log in and see the new application in their queue. And perhaps adding also a message to the applicant saying, we have received your application. You can create all the alerts and the messages between different users in the backend and the applicant.
Great. There is another question. Do we already have systems in place to navigate such a bidding process?
Good question. If there are, if I understand the question correctly, is to say, have we been involved in a project where we actually used this e-registration system to structure the bidding process in a country, and the public procurement, basically a public procurement system. No, but that would be a very interesting case for this system and could definitely be adapted to that one.
Great.
I could say that we have used the system for a variety of types of systems from, because it's UN trade and development is very focused sometimes on entrepreneurship, investment, etc. So a lot of the systems have been on facilitating business registration, taxpayer registration, facilitating foreign and domestic investments, but there are also systems, for instance, one in Colombia on carbon emission, so that individuals and businesses have to declare how much and help them calculate and declare how much carbon they are emitting, so that based on the different levels, they have different requirements, etc. So it can be used for any type of a system. We're using it in Mali for the importation of pharmaceuticals to register new medical products and drugs into the country. So the use cases are infinite. But public procurement will be an excellent one, one that could be very good to implement.
Great. I think, yeah, maybe it's the same person behind the comment. Yes, to promote this into government. That's good. We're brainstorming here. If you have any other recommendation, would be more than welcome.
You mean recommendation to how to promote this?
No, I mean from participants.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. And it's really good that you have mentioned this example regarding pharmaceuticals, because these services could be applied in different fields. So it shouldn't be seen just for specific topics, but clarifying processes and everything could be for everything.
Absolutely. And remember what we showed, the procedures are always the same. Remember that slide where we saw everything very complicated? Procedures are, from the point of view user, they're complex because there are many steps, but actually the structure is always more or less the same. Apply, pay, obtain, right? These steps, and it's the same for any type of government service. Do I want an import permit for my MRI scanner? Do I want to register the birth of my new baby? Do I want to register at a public university? Do I want to pay taxes? How do I pay taxes? Tax payment systems, etc. They're all using the same structure. You need to provide information. You need to provide documents, data. You have to pay a fee. You submit the file. There is processing. We're going back into that basic component. That one, I've yet to find really a government service that doesn't apply to this structure. So the use cases are infinite.
And then we have another comment. It says, correct. Sometimes there are a given amount cap for certain government agencies to apply these into their systems, say below 50,000 USD. Otherwise, there is a need of competitive bidding, which will be difficult since there seems to be no active ways to actually apply for bidding using this platform.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, please feel free to write to us after if you have an interest in seeing how, if you would like to see ways to implement such a system in your country. We're really happy to have a discussion with you afterwards. Please don't hesitate to write to us, get in touch. We get your information and we can set up a meeting to discuss options.
Great. Kiatan, considering we have 10 minutes left, would you mind to walk us through the specific web page of the digital government program?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a good way to end this. So we have this website here. It's called Digital Government World Academy. And we're going to send the website, I believe, was also on the flyer. It's still a little bit of a work in progress, but the idea is that you see here, I'm going to make it a bit bigger. There are the webinars. So for instance, the webinar today, information on that webinar and upcoming webinars will be published here together with the brochure that you can see here and the registration link. So we'll probably have more webinars very soon coming on, maybe to dig even deeper into service design and other aspects of digital government. Same workshops is very much what we are doing. And this is our curriculum that you can see here with the different levels. Introduction to digital government, how to create the ability to create a single service, integrated services, combined services, whole government approach. So have a look at this. And here there's a selection of the different workshops we've held in different countries on the various projects. And here, online courses, this one is a little bit deceptive. It says, stay tuned. Soon we'll have some online, what we call asynchronous courses, I believe, that will allow you to, at your own pace, take some courses and get some certificates of completion. So stay tuned on that page. And here we have we've highlighted some of the projects that we're working on at the Digital Government Academy. For instance, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in Jordan, in Palestine. For instance, in Palestine, we have recently completed the implementation of a system called PAL Business, which is the business registration service to reserve a company name. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. To extend a reserve name, to transfer a reserve name, to register a limited liability company, a general partnership, to modify company data. So a fully fledged business registry, right? That is fully automated and online. So please have a look at this website. After this seminar, we're sharing the link here to this Academy training webinar service design, where you can access some of the tools and the presentation and the systems that I showed and the different PowerPoints, etc. So we'll be sharing this with you. And for those who stuck all the way to now, you will also be receiving a certificate of participation from the Digital Government Academy in the next few days. So thanks very much for your active participation and for your attention. It's been a pleasure to share this experience with you today. And thanks very much. Over to you, Ana Lucia.
Thank you so much, Kjartan. It's been really interesting. Every single time I learn more from you, and I hope that participants have also enjoyed as we did. So let's close the session. Thank you so much once again for joining us today. We warmly invite you, all of you, to stay tuned for further learning initiatives on digital government. Thank you so much once again. We have shared with you the link to visit this webpage, and we will be sending it by email, and also we will be contacting those participants who managed to stay with us at least 75% of the time, so you get access to your certificate of participation. Thank you. We wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you. Bye-bye.